When I finally was boarding the plane, there was a flight attendant in front of me. And as I walked on, he looked at me and he said, "Good afternoon, sir." I said, "Good afternoon." I said, "I have one goal today," because people were kind of backed up. Others were putting their luggage up. And he said, "One goal? What do you mean?" I said, "I have one goal on this flight today for me." And he said, "Oh, really, sir? What's that?" And I said, "My goal is to make sure that I don't do or say anything stupid that would now make me internet famous." He smirked and tried to control the laughter because, you see, there had been a ton of, it seemed like, recent situations at that point where people had suddenly become internet famous because of meltdowns they had had on an airplane of some sort, yelling, screaming, seeing things that weren't there, you name it. It had also been an especially difficult day because that flight had been delayed for, get this, 7 hours. And so I had actually gone back to my office and Ubered back when it was time for the next flight to take over. So people's nerves were already frayed. Well, it became a joke between he and I on the rest of the flight. He'd come by me every once in a while and he'd do this. Like, "I'm watching you." And we would laugh about it. I think people probably wondered, why in the world were we laughing? Well, it at least broke the ice, and so it gave him a laugh and it gave me a laugh, and kind of kept a little bit of the tension that could have been more, it minimized it a bit. But I have to tell you that when you think about people that have wound up on the internet because of a traffic situation where somebody's had a video camera, or they have had a meltdown on an airplane or in the airport, someone has put it on video, they've had a fight, they've had a rant, they've had a road rage incident, they have had a parking lot fight. There are so many of these things when you see them on the internet. They wind up on YouTube, they wind up on Facebook, they wind up on X, they wind up on Instagram, you name it. Every one of these things seem to make it to the airwaves, and the people suddenly, unintentionally, become internet famous. That's what we refer to as unintentional consequences. We all have them, don't we? We have unintentional consequences of our actions and of our words. Somebody thinks that they're just going to have a meltdown on the plane and start yelling and screaming at others that nobody else is going to see it. They're just going to see it on the plane. Or for a moment, they get so lost in their temper and so lost in their rage that they forget that not only are there other people there, but this could be a situation that could cause a bigger problem than they could possibly imagine. Unintentional consequences. Every word that we speak, every action that we take, it's important to remember that there are unintentional consequences. How do you avoid them? I don't know what the big answer is. I don't know how we avoid unintentional consequences other than we take a little bit more of a pause before we lose our temper, that we think a little more before we speak our words, that before we take that action, that we ask, what am I missing? What can happen if I do this? What could happen when I say this? Who else could it impact? Who else could it affect? Whether I say it or whether I do it. And I think it's also important to remember there's always a camera and there's always an open mic. When I have trained communicators, I've reminded them of that. It's like with a journalist, there's no such thing as off the record. There's always an open mic. There's always a camera somewhere that someone can pick up and record what you were doing. Sometimes it even may be recorded out of context, but that's all it takes to go viral. Unintentional consequences. You know, when we go in to a situation, often we have one intention, but you know the saying, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. It's best to do our best to avoid those unintentional consequences.